You wanted to romanticize growing up as a trans kid, whatever, but especially for homeless youth, like what is Nicole Maines saying that they're trying to use this YA graphic novel to groom homeless youth to becoming trans? The worst stuff at DC is admittedly worse than the worst stuff at Marvel, but the best stuff at DC is absolutely blowing the doors off the best stuff at Marvel and has been for the last several years. And nobody is taking notice within comic books. The readership is not up. Actually, the sales are down. DC Comics somehow, despite having better books, are actually doing worse because they cannot stop fucking themselves over. They cannot stop getting in their own way and becoming their own worst enemy. The biggest impediment between DC Comics and success really is DC Comics and probably Jim Lee. It feels like they are perpetually stuck in 2016, 2017, 2018, and they are continuously going back to these ideas of what's actually going to work to allow DC Comics to compete with Marvel Comics, not on like a quality scale, because I do think that they're better, but just on a sales-wise. They continuously do every stupid thing that Marvel Comics has been doing, yet they're just doing it more and more. The latest example comes from this interview with Nicole Maines on Adventures in Poor Taste. You probably don't know who Nicole Maines is. I guess they depicted the character Dreamer in the Supergirl show on the CW, a character that never got over on a TV show that was canceled due to no interest, to low viewership or whatever. Let's bring this character into the DC Comics universe. And because the hero from the TV show is trans, we have to have a writer that's trans, and the person that portrayed the character on the TV show is trans. So therefore, they are going to be the writer on the comic book series. And they talked to Nicole Maines about how they're queering up or amplifying queer voices in comic books and what they've been doing basically to get ready for this. And it's so embarrassing. And you can see why none of this shit will ever work, because Nicole Maines does not care about superheroes, does not care about DC Comics, probably doesn't really care about Dreamer, other than the fact that people know who Nicole Maines is because Dreamer exists. But it's only like 40 people that know who Nicole Maines and Dreamer are. And the worst part is AITP is also stuck in 2018 as to what's actually going to create interest or enthusiasm in comic books. It's all about representation. It's never about the story quality or anything like that. And this is the way that the article starts out. Dreaming big, Nicole Maines on amplifying queer voices in DC Comics. In a world where representation matters now more than ever, Nicole Maines stands tall as a beacon of hope and inspiration. With their latest venture into the world of comics, Suicide Squad Dream Team #1 out March 12th, and Bad Dream, a Dreamer story out April 2nd, Maines is not just telling stories, she's rewriting narratives, uplifting marginalized voices, and reshaping perceptions. At its center is Dreamer, a superhero relatively new to DC Comics, but not to pop culture at large. This idea that people know who Dreamer is and that Nicole Maines as Dreamer, I guess, is some type of draw, complete fallacy. This is going to put zero asses in seats. And the idea that representation matters now more than ever is the biggest fallacy. We've been blasting holes in this stupid narrative for years upon years. The most important thing in all of comic books right now is creating enthusiasm, generating interest, and actually selling comic books, which this isn't going to do. It doesn't matter how much representation, it doesn't matter how many voices you amplify using DC Comics if they end up shutting the publisher down because you actually couldn't sell the comic books to anybody. There is really no proof out there that a large mainstream audience wants any of this stuff. That's the big problem. That's why it's been failing for so long. The prevailing narrative since 2015, 16, 17, 18, that this is the most important thing that comic books can do, has been proven to be a complete fraud because nobody pays for it, and this is a commercial endeavor. Now, speaking on what Nicole Maines did to get ready for Suicide Squad Dream Team and the characters that Nicole Maines portrays in that book, this is what Nicole Maines said specifically. So I spent a lot of time on the DC Wiki page, lots of tabs open all the time. For Clock King, I read Batman Killing Time, which was very, very helpful. I watched a couple of YouTube videos that did a deep dive into their character. I did some things with Bizarro and Black Alice. Deadeye is harder because he is such a new character. For him, it was more like really making sure I understood where the kid came from. He grew up in this environment with Amanda Waller. She's been kind of grooming him to be this like meta-human bloodhound his entire life. So he's someone who gets down to business and gets the job done. If you think that you can be ready to write a superhero comic book featuring characters that have been around for 2 or 3 years, let alone some characters have been around for 70 or 80 years in this case, by going to the DC wiki page. You have another thing coming. That is not how it works. That is not what those wiki pages are for. Those are just quick references that are done by fans. Those are not definitive origins or even story arcs of the characters. The only one of those like fan sites that I would say is definitive as far as the coverage of the characters and the history and all that is like TMNT Entity. And even then, I wouldn't recommend writers going to the wiki pages for like the fucking cliff notes. You should be reading the stories and learning about the characters, and then going to Batman Killing Time to learn about Clock King. Oh my goodness. Where are the DC comic editors on this one? Who wrote Batman Killing Time? Tom King. What is Tom King famous for as a comic book writer, especially at DC Comics? Not following the narrative or history or characterization of the characters themselves. Literally rewriting everybody to make them fit the story that he would like to tell. You should never ever in your life go to a Tom King story hoping to find the true heart of a character. You are going to find the true heart of Tom King and not the actual Clock King himself. And as someone that is a YouTuber and I have done deep dives into characters and stuff, I don't create deep dives for comic book writers. I don't create character deep dives for fucking comic book editors. You need to do your own research. Those are for people looking for quick introductions or maybe big pieces of history about the character. Because you literally cannot fit the history of Superman into a 20-minute video. That's like a 5 or 6 hour video. You don't have time to get into the minutia of who the characters are and a lot of the real character development out there. You should not be watching YouTube videos to get ready to write a comic book. But that is what Nicole Maines is doing. And this is why DC Comics cannot stop fucking themselves over. They refuse to hire comic book writers. Well, Nicole Maines is an actor that portrayed the character on the TV show. Of course they should be writing the comic book, trying to get the comic book character over. And you wonder why in 2 years, Dreamer will just be a variant cover model for Pride Month. That is the only thing this character will be relegated to because you never actually hired somebody competent and professional enough to write a real story about the character. Speaking about the YA graphic novel they've got coming out based on Dreamer, this is what Nicole Maines said. I kind of struggle with trying to make it something for everybody. And I think the success came when I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write the story that I like. I'm just going to write the story that I would have liked to have seen as a young kid. The way I always say it, there's representation for straight people and there's representation for queer people. I really wanted this to be like something for folks to look at to see our experience and also romanticized a little bit, especially for homeless youth. If only there was a place like Bottom Dollar Inn where you could go and it was a party every day and it was like no questions asked and just every facet of your identity was accepted there. Like if only there was something that cool. That is such a weird thing. So you wanted to romanticize growing up as a trans kid, whatever, but especially for homeless youth, like what is Nicole Maines saying that they're trying to use this YA graphic novel to groom homeless youth to becoming trans? That's kind of the way it reads there. That is a really, really, really weird thing to say in an interview. I can't believe it. Like, what was the purpose behind what you wrote? Well, I really wanted to groom the homeless youth out there. Like, my goodness, that is just really strange. This idea that, well, every place should be like the Bottom Dollar Inn where every day's a party and you don't have to work and everyone just accepts every facet of who you are and what you represent and all that stuff. Well, why don't you just take all the conflict out of your life? That's part of what these stories are supposed to be, to where you can go and you can see people struggle and all that kind of stuff. That's part of like the experience, isn't it supposed to be? Not just going to some magical place where all of a sudden everyone likes you. That's Mary Sue fucking behavior right there. You're purposely taking all the stakes out of your own story and all the struggle for your character overcome that might make them actually relatable in the process. The Bottom Dollar is, to go out there and really romanticize what it's like to grow up being trans, especially for the homeless youth out there. Just really weird shit like that. And this is coming from a professional comic book writer that DC Comics are promoting. And guess what? We have not seen the end of this, because this is what Nicole Maines said they and Jadzia Axelrod of Hawkgirl Infamy are going to be doing in the future. I don't know if people are truly ready for the way that we are going to just push these two girls. I'm so excited to get these two as adults, as superheroes working together, knowing that they have this history of being friends since they were teenagers and then growing into being trans alien superhero girls. One of the most fun parts is getting to decide what the history between Ciandi and Naltor is, getting to establish that connection. Naltor in general was so underdeveloped, and so I am getting to sort of flesh out this just as a planet, as a people, as a culture. One of my favorite things was Rai drew up the entire Naltor alphabet, so now that exists. So there you have it, folks. The actor behind Dreamer, that's now the writer in comic books behind Dreamer, is going to be teaming up with the person behind Hawkgirl and Galaxy, the Prettiest Star. Oh yeah, that Hawkgirl series that didn't sell anything because it was terrible. Oh yeah, that Hawkgirl series that was rejected by Hawkman fans the world around because it basically bastardizes the entire character and doesn't take into consideration any of the history of the character, just rewriting everything. Because writers like Jadzia Axelrod and Nicole Maines aren't there to tell good stories that make sense with the character. They're actually there to be reaffirming queer voices within DC Comics that didn't exist 5 minutes ago, as if they're the most important things in the world. Whereas at the exact same time, actual queer voices within DC Comics that have been there for decades upon decades are not utilized whatsoever because they actually were superheroes first. That's why you can't have Midnighter and Apollo be featured anywhere. We only get stuff like Dreamer and Galaxy and all these stupid self-insert characters that everyone is just absolutely tired of. DC Comics cannot be successful as a publisher as long as they continue putting this trash into their fucking lineup. As long as they continue hiring people that have no interest in the characters, no interest in the universe, no interest in superheroes, and certainly no interest in what the actual readers of DC Comics want to read. You heard it right there. Nicole Maines was like, you know what? I really found my spot when I said, what would I like to have read when I was 5 years old? That is not how mainstream entertainment works, and that is one of the big reasons that DC Comics are failing so spectacularly, despite Marvel Comics just dropping the ball across the board. The best chance DC Comics has had in the last 20 years to overtake Marvel Comics as far as sales and popularity, they cannot take advantage of it because they are perpetually stuck in 2018. Representation is more important now than ever when that has been proven to be completely false across the board. Nobody wants representation for the sake of representation. DC fans want superhero stories. Now, if there's cool representation in there, so be it. That's great. That's another cherry on top. But once the superhero becomes only the representation and not a superhero anymore, see also John Kent, Superman. See also Tim Drake, Robin. Established characters with established mantles that people basically disregarded because they were only representation. That is where they have dropped the ball, and that is where they will continue to drop the ball at DC Comics because they cannot get out of their own way. They cannot stop fucking themselves over. Now should be the time DC Comics are taking over, and they cannot do it because Jim Lee is an absolute moron and he's stuck in 5-10 years ago, and they've got to get out of this. If you would like to continue all this journey through American comic books in modern times, but also talking about the good stuff, I do invite you to go over and check out the Patreon because we got lots more content, all focused on comic books there with your favorite guests like Aaron Sparrow, Doc, Jim from Weird Science, and obviously yours truly as well. 8 hours of new comic book podcasts every single week on the Patreon. There's a link in the video description, and I do think you're going to love it over there.